Creative Industry Awards celebrate great work and highlight the partnerships, trust, and bravery that make compelling ideas possible. As part of our industry awards series on The Lead Creative in collaboration with Bizcommunity, we unpack the stories behind the most remarkable work. In this episode, I co-host with Danette Breitenbach, editor of Bizcommunity. Joining us is Carl Willoughby, the Chief Creative Officer of TBWA Hunt Lascaris and Chair of Creative Circle South Africa, alongside Steph Niekerk, ECD of TBWA Hunt Lascaris and Creative Circle Exco member, both fresh from client wins at the bookmarks.
Finding a space that feels authentic to your brand, and if you can play in that area, and I think just you need to push the boundaries and ask yourself, is this entertaining? Because if it's not gonna, resonate on social or be shared or engaged with.
We talk about their work that performed well at the bookmarks, insights on what makes award-winning creativity, the partnerships behind it, and the cost of average marketing and advertising work.
Strong idea, strong insight, strong creative, massive impact. Those are quite critical. But there is something that really stood out for me specifically with our category, which was something our jury chair said. Gaetan, he's the CCO and co-founder of Marcel Paris, and he just said, put yourself in the shoes of the consumer. That was quite a big thing for me.
Follow The Lead Creative and Bizcommunity for more conversations like this and keep up with ideas that shape our industry. Welcome to the Lead Creative Podcast, where we talk to creative industry leaders, influencers, and brands. We discuss the strategies that influence brand thinking and shape industries. Thought leaders and heads of agencies let us in on some of their thinking and insights. I'm your host, Mongezi Mtati. Enjoy the show, and please share and subscribe. Colin, Steph, and Danette, thank you so much for making time again. This is the second of these conversations that we're having around awards, what it takes to kind of win awards and the partnerships that lead to award-winning work. So I'll start with you, Steph, and I'll ask you the same question as well, Carl. If you could have one, right, a client that doubles their budget every year, which is obviously the dream, or a client that has minimal, so the client that doubles their budget every year but gives you very sort of restricted scope in terms of creative freedom, and a client that has very minimal budget but gives you full creative freedom, which one would you go with?
I think this is a trick question, isn't it? This is a trick question. I think I would go with a client who gives me minimal budget but lots of freedom. Although you do need money to make award-winning work, it's just the fact of life. Our client City Lodge has very little budgets, but they make up for the lack of money with bravery, right?
Yeah.
But still, we struggle to compete internationally as a country because we are just being outspent at every corner. So, like I said, trick question.
And you, Carl, which one will you go with?
Yeah, for me, it's definitely creative freedom. I think if you, it just means that your brands have to have better standout quality ideas, So I think it's hard with some of the more restrictive brands to push the envelope, because some of those bigger companies, it's a big wheel to turn to change the creative output. So more creative freedom, less money, definitely. I'll just live in my car for the rest of my life.
Okay, cool. Yeah, no, I know. I mean, there's no easy way. There's no easy way because sometimes you wish there was more money. Sometimes you wish there was more creative freedom. There's no easy way to answer that question, but interesting thoughts nonetheless. So I'll come back to you, Steph. So TBWA Hunt Lascaris collected a number of awards this year at the bookmarks, from Save Our Stay to Netbot to some Heineken Savannah work. Why do you think creativity continues to make such a huge difference for brands in such a crowded digital space, especially?
I think precisely because it is so crowded, creativity and entertainment value makes business sense. If you want someone's attention, you've got to earn it. And so the work that cuts through and delivers results is the creative work. You cannot afford to be boring anymore. Boring is very costly because you're going to invest in that campaign and absolutely no one's going to take note of it.
Carl, to this point by Steph, the fact that it's crowded, a lot of brands make up for it being crowded with putting a lot of advertising behind the work so that you see it everywhere. Boring as it is, you kind of see it a lot. So as a result, it has sort of maximum reach, but it's boring. So how then do you still make the debate for creativity when one brand looks at their competitor and says, brand B is spending so much, their work is all over the place. Why do you want me to kind of be more creative when I could just put more money into the ads?
I think because it's costing you more money. There was a study done by, I think it was System 1, Eat Big Fish, and they spoke about how boring brands have to spend, I think it's on average 7.3% more on advertising to get to realize the same impact as a brand that uses creativity. I guess in a economically stressed world, if I were looking at this, I'd go, if I just use creativity, it's going to cost me less with better results. I don't know about you, but that for me makes more sense, right?
Yeah, and I mean, I remember seeing that study as well. I think they were launching when they were launching in South Africa, they kind of shared that study and the impact of it over time. The fact that work becomes impactful. Steph, I see you want to say something, and I'll let you go. I'll let you in just now. So I've noticed that as well. The next brand that I kind of want to talk about, which is Savannah, has done exactly that. They've remained memorable. They've created work that is worthy of conversation, from the comedy to the campaigns to everything else. And I think the #TryJanuary work, once again, is one of those that earned quite a number of wins at this at the bookmark specifically. Humor and cultural nuance there, I think, played a big role. Why is that so powerful with audiences? Steph, I know you wanted to say something, but that question and then whatever you wanted to bring up.
Yeah, I just wanted to pick up on the previous point. Just because you see it everywhere doesn't mean you're going to engage with it or remember it. But the TryJanuary work and Savannah in particular, we're very lucky. I've been with this brand for a number of years now. And like Savannah, in the DNA of the Savannah brand is we are here to make people laugh. And that is our purpose. And to have a purpose so clear and so defined, and it does lend itself to entertaining work. I think people in this world where everything feels overwhelmingly serious and negative, really, everyone's dealing with a lot of stress, a lot of anxiety, the world is unsettled. People crave comic relief or to laugh at their problems. I think as a country, we resonate very well with humor. We deal with our problems by making jokes about them. And that's a very South African kind of coping mechanism, if I can say that. We are the masters of the mean. And so I think that's why the work always resonates and lands well with people, you know. And I think that like we've always supported stand-up comedians, and like any comedian, if the brand is a comedian, great comedy is based on really deep insights, and the insights is what makes the work resonate so well and make it so relevant. So, wow, they totally get me. Or, geez, I've never looked at it that way, but it's so true. And that's the kind of feeling the work evokes.
So that's brings me to a question for Carl. You recently spoke about your experience judging at Cannes, and you said messy creates the best work. And I thought perhaps you could expand on what you mean by messy in a world where we're always seeking to have control, I guess.
And yeah, there was that conversation was around, specifically around AI. And I guess the similarities between what AI is going to do, in my opinion, and control there's a lot of similarities there, right? I think messy is what gets you to think a little differently. You know, I think if we're patterned in our behavior and in our thinking, kind of end up with the same results. You know, it becomes expected, it becomes maybe strategic is good, but I think if we don't lean into messy, we don't get those ideas that feel maybe riskier, distinctive. I'm going to use the word creative. Messy allows that to happen for me, and I think if we just looked at controlled behavior in our thinking, we're going to get very controlled behavior work. So messy opens up the whole creative thing for me.
Yeah, there is this feeling that's come out of Cannes about sort of sameness of work and the sameness of things. A lot of cars look the same these days. Things look the same. So we do want to find that uniqueness. And how do you, as an agency, cultivate this kind of culture?
Yeah, I think we try and make sure that our North Star, in terms of what we align to, in terms of great creative work, is clear. I think there's a bench of ECDs who push for a certain caliber of work, including Steph. We make sure that we celebrate the right work. I think that's important for us. That alignment within the agency is quite important. We obviously do a whole lot of the regular stuff. We do the right inspiration stuff. We've got a thing here at the agency called 9 a.m. sessions where we get people in to come and talk about specific themes. It might be music, it might be film, it might be production, AI. But we try and keep everyone inspired as much as we can. And then that alignment thing is quite important. If we're celebrating, we've got to celebrate everything, right? Because all the work pays the bills. But from an ambition point of view, we've got to make sure that everyone understands what the ambition is to do iconic work. And if people don't understand that, then they misalign. So we beat that drum as much as we can, whenever we can. It's a long answer.
And then this year at Cannes, also, just to stay with that kind of theme within the agency, you brought home the Young Lion Silver with your team of Paula and Komatsu, and really great creative young team. How do we ensure that we can inspire and bring more young talent into the agencies when advertising is not really a career that young people are inspired to go into these days? And once we get them in there, how do we keep them here in South Africa as well?
Yeah, I think, it's tough getting, the potential for young talent in the industry is massive. Yes, the industry is shifting as we speak. I don't think I'll say a little bit of this with my Creative Circle hat on, is that I don't think we're doing enough to get the young talent, I guess the word's inspired, to come into the industry. I think there are initiatives like Blackboard that's doing that. But I think the industry beyond Creative Circle can do a lot more to inspire the youth. On Saturday, we hosted Blackboard. We hosted about 20 kids here. We spoke about what we do as an agency. We showed a whole body of work to inspire. We spoke a little bit about photography. I happen to dabble in photography on the side, and I just spoke about how some of that can open up opportunities for people. I think in a largely mass market country, if I may, it should make sense for people of the market to be in our industry when it comes to communicating to the mass market. If insights and, the idea of relevancy are key themes that we drive for business success, then it should make sense that we're using people and pulling them into our industry to help make better advertising that connects with our audience. But it's tough. The industry is under stress. The industry is time-based, mostly. So people are just putting food on the table in terms of working. And it's hard to stop and pause and turn and go, okay, cool. How do we inspire the young guys? How do we keep them motivated? I think within the industry, once the youth are in the industry, it's everyone's duty to make sure that we nurture them. And unfortunately, there's so many dimensions to that. It's an industry that requires a lot of hard work. It's an industry that requires late nights, going beyond the 9 to 5. It's an industry with client stresses and pressures, and it's not for everyone. So, and the good talent who survive that seem to succeed because they've built up a thick skin. But unfortunately, there are a lot of casualties along the way, and that's the reality of the industry that we're in. So I think it's up to every agency to make sure that they nurture the young talent. We celebrate our young talent. I'm very excited about them. We make sure that we start off with the right alignment, the kind of work that we want to celebrate and want to push, and then we keep nurturing them. And I think, Steph, I'm going to probably hand over to you, but Steph's very good with that as well, in terms of the young guys within her team as well.
I think, the type of people who want to work in advertising, we are makers and creators. And what excites us is making and creating. And when you see your idea come to life and the process of collaborating, and that is the magic, right? And once you get that feeling, it's the best feeling. When you get your work bombed or rejected, it's the worst feeling. So a big part of our job is to make people believe in themselves. We'll believe in you until you can believe in yourself, and teaching resilience and grit and celebrating the joy of creating. And I think with anything, to keep people in the industry is you've got to keep them engaged and interested. And people want to see the fruits of their labor. I think we get disheartened when we're working so hard and we can't see any rewards. And so it's important for us to be mindful of that and to give praise freely and to reward when it's due, and I think that kind of stuff builds creatives. And we need to create not only brilliant talent, but resilient talent. To weather all the storms of the industry as we go through all these massive seismic changes, is to create a safe space where people can grow and people can thrive.
And I suppose being a winning agency does help.
Yes, I think it helps massively.
That's one of the bonuses, I guess.
Yes, I think all of us, we here on the shoulders of giants, right? Hans has got such a legacy that when you come here, you're like, oh, I am walking in the footsteps of some of the greatest people who've ever come out of South Africa, So there is an amount of pressure that is built into just being here, and a lot of expectation, But at the same time, we are very lucky in that automatically attracts a certain type of person, a certain type of creative. And yes, our guys can see if you can win. And so I think an atmosphere of winning creates more winning, like right here for you, it creates a momentum. So
Yeah.
you know, we're not saying that the only thing that matters are awards. That's not true. And neither should anyone believe that their worth is related to awards, because that's not true either. But I think it's about having a healthy balance of understanding the game and wanting to get on the field and playing it, you know.
If you're enjoying The Lead Creative, please share this episode with your network and hit follow or subscribe. Enjoy the show. I just want to go back to something that Danette was asking about what you said, Carl, that messy, how much that sort of messy kind of contributes to work. It just reminds me, but this is a question for you, Steph. It reminds me of a conversation that we had last time when we had Polisa and Steph here. And one of the things that Steph said was there's a certain kind of absurdity that kind of emerges when you look at what people are creating and doing online. So how much does that kind of, one, bleed into the work that we do for brands? And also, how do you know when that level of absurdity is just a fad that doesn't belong in brand work? How do you make that distinction?
Well, I think that's the truth. Is we're not only competing with other brands. We create on digital. We compete with other content. The stuff people watch on TikTok. The crazy, most absurd, the silliest, the funniest. So I think for brands to survive on digital, I think we need to entertain. I think I took this criticism on myself in Cannes. Like the one thing that I came home with is we are far too rational. You know, we want to go A, B, C, D, therefore buy X. Where we are in an environment where you're competing with these creators with millions and trillions of followers. I almost died in a Gen Z stampede in Cannes because this creator was talking, and then you realize it was very scary. You realize what you're actually competing with, and I think it's obviously if it feels right for the brand, it would be very weird if a bank suddenly went extremely absurd and it wasn't true to their brand. But it's finding a space that feels authentic to your brand, and if you can play in that area, and I think just we need to push the boundaries and ask yourself, is this entertaining? Because if it's not gonna resonate on social or be shared or engaged with. So entertaining can be informative or inspiring, or but then I need something.
Yeah, it's true. It makes me think of Gladiator, where he says, are we entertained? I guess things haven't changed that much. They've just moved out of the Colosseum and online.
And like a basic human need, right?
Yeah, it's just a fundamental almost. And of course, we all like to be entertained, like you say. The world is very busy, but yet there's a lot of routine and sameness, and like you were saying, anxiety. So being entertained really does sort of just take you for that 1 minute, even if it's a second. And, like you take a good billboard, a good out-of-home creative can be, while you're sitting in traffic, just give you a smile, and then hopefully the person will also remember the brand, because this is a thing I find sometimes there's some great stuff out there, and maybe it is entertaining, but I can't tell you who the brand is 5 minutes later. And I find that there's this attention economy. So how do we overcome that? I know I'm asking you a very difficult question.
I think you need to make sure that the work is always related to your product, or it's not silly for silly's sake. It's rooted in a product truth. I think Apple does this very well. The Apple ads are some of the best ads in there, but they're always based on a single benefit or a feature or something that's true to Apple and the product that they're selling. So I think once we lose the fundamentals of marketing, of finding the USP or, what is the benefit we want to highlight, and then finding the craziest way to tell that story and making sure that you are not forgetting about the product and the branding and the assets and the CI and all of that, you can avoid that kind of pitfall.
Carl, I mean, it is something that you also spoke about when you spoke about awards, and you said that they're more than branding rights. And I just wanted to circle back to that. You said it's about creativity, credibility, and business. And perhaps you could mix that into your answer.
Yeah, I mean, I think when you speak about credibility, I think certain brands earn the right to say certain things. And I think brands that behave a certain way consistently kind of earn the right to do or to communicate in a certain way. I think if a brand is playing it safe consistently, that brand will always be known for playing it safe. I think there's a thing just on credibility. I'm going to speak about credibility from a brand point of view. If a product isn't a good product, if I can say it that, and you have some of the best advertising, you'll probably have limited uptake, right? The advertising or communication can only take you so far, or the experience can only take you so far. So I think if you're asking about credibility from a brand point of view, and maybe tell me if I'm understanding the question, I think brands have to be, brands have to be authentic. They have to have all these good values to kind of really resonate with their audience, and they have to be credible with what they put on the table for the audience, because the audience will see through that, despite how good advertising might be. So I hope I've answered your question.
Yeah. I don't know, Mongizi, if you got anything you want to add to that or ask?
Yeah, no, I think not to that. I just want to, I suppose, come back to you, Steph, on stuff that was awarded once again at the Bookmarks. The City Lodge work, which you mentioned earlier when you started the conversation, was awarded in integrated data and budget categories. Why do you think that City Lodge was so, I suppose, open and willing to go with a bold, creative, brave idea when some brands tend to shy away from that? And again, I think it's something that you mentioned earlier, that creativity really is that differentiator. It's what makes work kind of stand out. But we are still in this space of having to convince brands that it truly does, and what kind of creative work really kind of stands out. Why do you think, thinking about the partnership with this client, why do you think they were so open and so willing to back a brave, bold idea?
So I think, once again, we're incredibly lucky. City Lodge's legacy has been humor. I remember being in college and seeing those old City Lodge ads with make yourself at home and using your 1-star where it's needed. So I think that's always been baked into the culture of their business. And I think we have John Hunt to thank for that when they started with City Lodge, knowing that they're a challenger brand, competing with the likes of Southern Sun and 30 years ago, they were startups. And so, again, to cut through the clutter and be noticed, they had to be different. They had to zag when everyone zigs. Thank goodness we've got great clients, and we've never wavered from City Lodge's tone, which was always slightly irreverent and funny. Like I mentioned to you, they don't have massive marketing budgets, especially in the post-pandemic world where the hospitality sector took a hell of a knock. But we know that if we do the right, clever kind of work, it can yield the results that we were looking for. In this case, City Lodge SOS took what is perceived as a negative, so i.e. the hotel's consistency or the fact that it's just boring, in this world that's obsessed with curated Airbnb experiences. And, again, universally, how many of us had hits and misses on Airbnb? Everyone has a war story or a horror story of holiday accommodation going wrong, and we could tap into that deep vein of insight, and milk it and actually create a new demand moment, which is post disappointment, with a panic button that you could book yourself into a city lodge at a push of a button. So I think we have a client who loves us and who trusts us, and trust means so much. I can tell you that all my best work is done with people or relationships I have with clients where there's a mutual level of respect and trust.
It's such a good point about the length of your relationship and the agency and the client having worked together. And it's something that we see all the time. And we spoke about this the other day, Mungizi and I, about how this whole thing about having a long-term relationship with a client is being spoken about more and more, and its importance. And then you just went and spoke about this wonderful relationship that you've had with City Lodge for how many years, which just shows that the longer you're in a relationship with a client, the more they trust you, the more you kind of can do brave work for them. And it shows because, I don't know how many gold and other bookmark awards you won for that particular campaign, actually. Do you find that trust is definitely there? Like you can feel it when you're working with them?
I can definitely feel it, and every creative who works on the brand can feel it. Even if they're not 100% sure that this is the funniest joke, they'll go, but we trust you because we are not millennials, or we trust you, we are not the target market. And I think that is so important, right? Like, all great creativity is actually a leap of faith. And City Lodge has been with Hans for 30 years. That's how long it's been. So, and like they say, trust is earned. So someone and a lot of people before me worked to earn that trust, and I have a responsibility to keep it and to earn it. So yeah.
Carl, I'll come to you with this question. So there's a conversation that's doing the rounds. It has been doing the rounds for maybe the past 2 years now, and it is affecting agencies quite a lot. And this is the idea of clients asking for discounts or for less rates when agencies use AI, or for the use of AI or including AI in their work. How does that firstly affect agencies in the main, and how does it affect the creativity that comes out as a result?
I think it's an interesting question because it's all the stuff we're kind of going through at the moment. I think from a costing point of view, you speak about efficiencies. I think one of the exercises we've done is that we make the assumption that if we put a prompt in from a generative point of view, I'm not speaking about AI in ops. I mean, from a generative AI point of view, put a prompt in, you get an outcome, you get content, you get copy. Cool, it's quick. But the reality is, at the end of the day, the standard of the work still has to come first, right? So efficiency is one thing. But if you want to do, and if you're just rolling stuff out and you're trying to be efficient in that way, that's fine, right? And that's probably going to have an impact on agencies, to be totally honest with you. Probably, definitely. But if you want to use AI, if you want to use an efficient tool, but you want to deliver great creative, it still takes time to do that. You have to invest the time to get the right prompts. You have to invest the time to get the right outcome. That still takes time. And I think, unfortunately, what's happening in the industry is this thing around the novelty of efficiency with AI that comes along with AI. And we celebrate that, and we can't look beyond the efficient cost-cutting aspect of it. But if you want to, and there's great AI images, we've seen that. Steph, you know about this, right? But we've seen that happen. We've seen that with copy, but that still takes time. So just because a prompt or one output could be cheap doesn't mean that a campaign has to be, I'm not going to say cheap, but that a campaign is just as cheap. You still need to invest man hours to get those prompts to the right space so that your output is at a certain level. I think I'm worried that people confuse novelty with taste. I think because AI is democratizing creativity for so many people, I think people feel that this is so quick, this is so easy, this should take you less time. So people are going to lean into that, and I think that's a very dangerous place to be. We're seeing that right now, and I think we've got to step back. If we're still speaking about creative standards and a lot of the things that we were speaking about earlier, if you're going to use AI, it's a tool that augments your creative process. I think there was someone I spoke to around this idea of AI and they called it augmented intelligence, where the AI is augmenting your creative process. But if you still want to deliver standout work, don't think that AI is just going to do that off the bat. If you want to have work output that's a certain level, that will still take time. AI is your tool. How you use it with your taste levels, with your standard, is really what will drive that output. So the industry is going to suffer from the novelty of efficiency as opposed to the quality that AI can deliver, because quality still takes time.
Just one last question on that from my end before I hand over back to you, Danette. So there's firstly, how do we teach clients, or where do we meet clients in the middle to kind of talk about these things and iron them out, that AI is not necessarily doing the work, it makes it slightly more efficient. The person still needs to do a lot of the work. And on the other side of that, there's this cyclical thing that keeps happening where certain industries insource the work. Sometimes they outsource it to agencies. How do you think that is going to accelerate now that there's AI and clients feel so much more confident that they can do it themselves using an AI tool?
I think there's going to be a lot more of the churn that AI can manage. I'm going to say I don't want to do churn. Like, I'd be happy not to do churn. I don't tell my CEO I said that. But I think it's gonna have an impact on the industry. A lot more things are, like we say, the democratization of creativity is something that the creative industry is really going to suffer with. But hopefully for people who, like Steph said earlier, who feel rewarded when they see their work manifest, hopefully that means that the better creative opportunities will be more concentrated for the better caliber creative people. And I'm not making comments on anything, but if AI can take away the churn work that we don't really enjoy or doing or find rewarding, I think that's a good thing. I really don't have all the answers because all of this is playing out, right? Like, these are based on what people are saying, what people are seeing. We're seeing stuff within the network, which is helping inform how we operate, how we show up. But I think if AI helps us reduce the stuff that we really don't want to do, that's cool. If that stuff goes in-house, that's cool. As a creative, I don't know what business impact that will have. I don't know how agencies are going to have to reinvent themselves to find other ways to make up that lost revenue. I think it's going to be an interesting time, but this cycle is not new in terms of innovation within any industry. It just means we've got to innovate as an industry. And I think that's the big thing to deal with.
If you're enjoying The Lead Creative, please share this episode with your network and hit follow or subscribe. Enjoy the show.
Yeah, I want to stay with that AI note because I had a conversation with someone the other day they spoke about this move from efficiency, because we've all got efficiency through AI, into more effectiveness. But they were saying the negative part of that is, and they used an actual example of an agency who was pitching, and the agency was asked by the brand, how much of your work will be done by AI? And they said, no, let's say 40%. And they said, well, then we want a reduction in our cost that you're charging us because you're using AI. Now, that's going to affect the business model. It's exactly what you're talking about. So then we're moving from it being efficient, wonderful. But now, how does it affect the business model going forward? So I was quite shocked at that. I don't know why, because it's happening in every industry, actually. But yeah, so how do we make sure then that agencies continue to be able to survive?
I think our costing models will have to adapt and change. I think it's a little bit of that. I think there was a meme or social media post around an artist, Picasso, doing a painting, and it took him 5 minutes to do it, and he wanted to charge for it, and it was a lot of money, and the buyer was like, but you just did this in 5 minutes. And he was like, yeah, but you're not paying for my 5 minutes. You're paying for all my experience up until this point. That principle still stands, right? I think there's agencies have to find a way to charge for their IP, for the time that gets them to get the AI to do what they need to do. And like I said, I don't have the answers. Those are things we're currently investigating. But I think the challenge will be if you've got everything automated, then how do you make money? And that's going to be a thing. I think personally what will happen is, there's this thing around taste, a level of taste that's really popping up for me through all of this right now. And, there's good taste and there's bad taste, and that's okay. People with bad taste will want and perpetuate bad taste work. People with good taste will want and perpetuate good taste work. We just hope we get more of those people on our client roster, as time goes by, and that they acknowledge what it takes to do great work. Because not everyone, we make the assumption that everyone's aligned to a creative standard. People are not. We've made that mistake. We've made that assumption. When we say what is good creative, and we're arguing with people about good creative, we understand, it's clear that the standard is not aligned, and that's why you were speaking about it earlier with City Lodge, where, there's an alignment in terms of the relationship with the client who understands what good creative work is. And I think that hopefully over time, good client relationships, agency client relationships will foster better ideas, whether AI is part of that or not. AI for me is an efficiency tool at this point that can help elevate the standard of the work. And you've got to pay for that. If you're going to use that tool, you've still got to pay for it. You've still got to find a way. You can't just be selling efficiencies. That's a different conversation. And we're not speaking about creative standards. We're speaking about churning work out. And you've got to be very clear about that.
Steph, I'll come to you. In fact, I'll start with you, but it's the same question for both you and Carl. So you're both used to winning at international shows globally, like Cannes, DNAD, and other shows as well. So the first part of the question is, why in your view does South African creativity punch so much above its weight on international stages? How can we get more of that? And the other side of it is from a creative circle perspective, because you're both part of Creative Circle, and of course, Carl, with you being chair, how do we make it accessible for other agencies to go to some of these shows, to go showcase some of the work? Because as it's always said, it's prohibitively expensive to enter some of these shows. And firstly, to enter shows at home so that the work kind of stands out here on home ground before you take it internationally on other stages. So how do we get more of the really great work that stands out on international stages? And from a Creative Circle perspective, how do we make it more accessible? What ideas are there to make it more accessible for the independent agencies and smaller agencies to rise above the noise?
Yeah, I think, there are people who will argue that in the last couple of years, post-pandemic, we're not punching above our weight anymore. I think there was a time then that we did. And we've debated this extensively in the agency as to why this is. And I think there seems to be a widening chasm when it comes to our budgets with what the internationals can put behind work and what we have to work with. Having said that, when we do win, we do punch way above our weight. And I think it's because our lack of resources in this country has created a culture of being quite scrappy and being very inventive and finding new and interesting ways to do something. And I think people appreciate that. People appreciate, I think, the work that does well internationally for us is work that is deeply locally relevant but globally competitive. So once we tell our own stories or solve a problem that is uniquely ours, that kind of work really gets noticed because it's new and it feels completely authentic and interesting to the judges. But so what I'm saying is, we definitely have taken a little bit of a dip in the last few years with our punching, but the things that end up popping through are the ones that are very locally relevant and authentic to ourselves, because we have a unique perspective on life and a unique tone of voice. So when we try and be like everyone else, we're not doing very well. When we stick to what we know and what we understand and what we get, and we execute that to a global standard, that's when we do well.
I agree with Steph. I don't know if it's the case where we're punching above our weight. I think last year we did something at Lurie's where we spoke about this. Or actually, even with Creative Circle, we said South Africa's punching below its weight currently. It's very easy for me to say that, but that's an observation. I think if you analyze how we've shown up internationally in previous years, let's say 3-4 years, and prior to that, we've done exceptionally well for such a small country, comparatively speaking. But I think there are so many factors that one can look at. I think the cost of entering international awards is a factor. That's a massive obstacle. Sadly, I would say this about a year ago, I used to be quite like, can D&AD One show are so critical as a global standard, but if you can't afford to enter those shows, you just don't show up over there. And as a result, it feels like you're penalized. So I guess it's important for agencies to enter awards where they can, to get that standard, to get that ambition going, that reward, that affirmation of the work being acknowledged, to celebrate that for agencies, for the people, for the brands. But I think, sadly, South Africa has fallen into, in my opinion, a very risk-averse space with a lot of brands. And I do think it comes down to economy. I do think it comes down to, if you've got more, if you've got more money to spend, you've got more capability, you're a lot less desperate for business success, I guess. You'll probably be less risk averse, right? And maybe that's a big factor. I think the standard is another big factor with these international awards. But I think what's important for the local market is to understand what the global standard is from an agency point of view. If you're an agency and you're not understanding what the benchmark is, you will probably keep delivering the same kind of work. And you'll see that. I think you'll see maybe with the upcoming awards like Lurie's. Last year, we didn't, as a market, we did well, I guess, South Africa, but the Middle East really did better, and is it because of economic factors? I don't know. But the work in terms of technical innovation, creative innovation for their market seems to be at a different level. So a point moving forward for me would be understand what the global standard is. Don't keep trying to do work that is just sitting at this level. Try and push work to another standard that's in line with what, if not better, what's happening internationally. If our ambition is where we are currently, that's going to be a problem, and that's something that all of us struggle with,
That's a great answer. And it really, I think, encompasses what is happening and what we need to take cognizance of. This year, you actually were on a jury in Cannes for the first time. Were there any insights that you got there that you can pass on to local agencies here? Just in terms of, because the whole judging process at Cannes also appears to be a thing, being in the room, how you present your case study. Last lead creative we heard about, something like that with the South African case study. Were there any lessons that you can pass on to us, Carl?
Yeah, I think, the science behind entering and winning awards is a thing that we all need to come to terms with. There is a global, like, the standard is a massive thing. How you package your work is a massive thing. Your reach, your impact, all those principles of, let's say, building a good case are important. So strong idea, strong insight, strong creative, massive impact. Those are quite critical. But there is something that really stood out for me specifically with our category, which was something our jury chair said. Gaiton, he's the CCO and co-founder of Marcel Paris, and he just said, put yourself in the shoes of the consumer. That was quite a big thing for me. I think if you do that first and you can do work that resonates, that's insightfully relevant to that consumer, and you can build the great creative on top of that, that's a good place to be. Whether it's lots of money, whether you have big budgets or not, but if you can do that properly, that's a big thing for me. There's a science behind the international awards, which for me was eye-opening. I think socialization of work, PR is massive. Do we play that PR game locally as well as they do internationally? Do we have access to the right influences that help elevate our campaigns beyond just the norm? Other markets have access to our Trevor Noah, and if you have his tweets on your case study, that's fundamentally going to elevate your work in terms of scale. But I think, other markets, smaller markets still do it well. If you look at South America, they similar space, similar challenges, but they're doing it. I think they're doing it with really, 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 really great creative work. And then the packaging is just solid. It just kind of really supports that great creative work. So I think the South Americans' work is actually way more distinctive. I think their storytelling is on another level. And I think we can learn a lot from that, to be honest.
I find that very interesting because there's always, I think one of the things that comes up sometimes in some of these conversations and it is cultural nuance. And I'm glad that you're mentioning that South American work, for instance, punches way above its weight because, again, it's its own unique culture as much as, African countries would have their own unique cultures and nuances and insights that they take to the international stage. So I think on my part, I've got one sort of last closing question. I don't know, Danette, if there's anything else that comes to mind that you want to ask before we close off.
No, I think it was a good note to close off on because something Cole touched on was something Steph said right in the beginning, and that's making sure that you're presenting work for your demographic, that the ad's not for you. So I just found that as an interesting point. Thank you. But that's all from me. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks. So, Steph, we have a question that our guest leaves. Our guest leaves for our next guest. And one of our previous guests was the founder of PR Powerhouse, Lebo Madiba. And the question she left, which I'd like to get your answer on, was, besides arts and culture, what other assets do we have at our disposal to build what brand South Africa can be?
Wow, that's yeah. I think what brand South Africa can be as a country.
How we can show up to the world. Yeah.
I think when people visit South Africa, the one thing they always talk about are the people. We are a very warm, very friendly, very funny nation. And I think we don't realize how much of a strength that is because we're in it, right? But I think foreigners are always drawn to us as people. We might not have the most resources, but there's a certain quality of being South African that is very, very powerful and attractive to people. And that's just the way we are. I think we take our diversity for granted. I was in Cannes, and every time I saw a stage full of white males, it felt so weird. I was like, what? But it looks strange. And I think, our diversity is our strength, and we don't even realize how far ahead we are of the rest of the world, and especially now when the rest of the world's trying to claw back all the initiatives. But we have an interesting melting pot of wonderful, warm people who, for the most part, get along no matter where they're from or what they have, So that is definitely a strength for me. The other strength is our incredible, inventiveness. Or we are a nation of hustlers. We make a plan, we improvise, and that's also something that is not the standard elsewhere in the world. We've got, I think if we could harness all that power of the nation to hustle and to innovate, we'd be unstoppable, And then we have the most beautiful country in the world. We've got such wonderful, wonderful natural beauty in this country. So those are just some ideas.
Yeah. Okay. No, those are great points. And now it's your turn. What question would you leave for our next guest on the state of the industry, their creative process, marketing, or anything along those lines?
For me, I would ask, what are we actually going to do to make our industry better? That's quite a tough, it's quite a heavy question, I guess, but I think, that's loaded with, do we understand that there's an issue? Do we understand that we're sitting there and things are moving past us and it's actually not great? Do we understand that the standards dropped? But for me, what do we do that holds the creative and marketing industry accountable for the state of the industry? Because I know I always feel guilty when I say this, but I have to say, do we think our work is great? Do we think we're doing groundbreaking work? Do we think people look at us and go, look at this amazing work coming out of South Africa? I think people look at Africa and see a lot of other amazing things coming out of Africa, if I can say, like music, culture, fashion. But I don't know if people are saying, wow, South African work is incredible right now. And I think that's a pity because we have some of the best creative people. We have some of the best, touching on some of the stuff Steph was speaking about our diversity, which is leaps and bounds ahead of other markets. But it's like we're not harnessing that. We think just showing up with insights is enough. We've got to show up with ideas. So as an industry, collectively, advertising, marketing, what are we going to do to correct the standard of the industry? That would be my question.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you both so much. This was a great conversation. I think one of the biggest things that I take away from it is that we should take our story out there. We should take what's authentic to us out to the world and understand that inside, because that's what's really rings true, not just to us, but rings true on the global stage and wins there as well. Kyle and Steph, thanks so much for making time to talk to us.
Thank you for listening to The Lead Creative. Did you get one insight that's worth sharing from this episode? Please share it with your network or your friends. Pop me some of your ideas and innovative finds on Twitter on @Mongezi. This podcast is available on Spotify, Stitcher, Apple, Google, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. You can also find me on Mongezi.com.